one who will be running the session for all. Sylvie, over to you. You are on mute. You are on mute. Still can't hear, Sylvie. No. Wait a second, let us also increase the volume from here and see if something is wrong in our setup, but it looks like the volume is high. Yeah. Can you check the volume on your computer as well? Because we can't hear you. No.
Yeah, ma'am, 2 minutes, ma'am. Please just rectify something in the hall setup. Just okay. Just give us 2 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you and good day to all. And thank you for this invitation to this startup. I'm very happy to join you. My name is Sylvie Martin. I am the Director of the Ethics Office at IFAD. Let me share my screen right now. Just a moment, please. Not what I wanted to share. Hold on. Sharing is paused. Okay, so sharing, share. No. Just give me a little bit of time here. I seem to have a little problem in finding the document.
Sure,
Okay.
take your time.
Can you see my screen? Can you see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Always a challenge to share the screen. So I'm pleased to be with you, and I will be talking about a topic that is unusual, maybe for a lot of colleagues here. It's on sexual misconduct. I will tell you a little bit more about this topic and why we're talking about it. It is actually a corporate priority in IFAD. So our executive board, which is composed of 18 member states and 18 alternate member states, so a total of 36, have approved this topic to be a high corporate priority. And a lot of our member states are conditioning the resources that they provide to IFAD with the efforts that we do as an institution to combat sexual misconduct, not only in IFAD, but also in relation to the project we finance. So this is why we're here today, and you will remember a few of those maybe newspaper clips that happened in the past few years about sexual misconduct at the United Nations in relation to projects that are funded by the United Nations. This is why we're talking about this topic. We're talking about sexual harassment and sexual exploitation and abuse. So we will be using the acronym throughout this presentation. So when these scandals came about, and you will recall even Oxfam had a really big scandal involving their own staff in Haiti. So there's a lot of discussion about this. Why? Because it impacts everything we do. It impacts rural development. It impacts the humanitarian aid agencies and what we're trying to do to help poor people and vulnerable individuals and beneficiaries out of poverty. So it just discredits totally the reputation of organizations in the UN or associated with the UN and in what they do. And so this is why we're talking about it today, and this is why we need our partners to get involved in this fight. So a lot of people want to know about facts, and these are facts that relate to the year 2021. You will note that in 2021, we had 115 reported allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse in the United Nations system. So this number is similar to the one we had for 2020. Remember, in 2020, we had lockdowns. Nonetheless, we had allegations coming in. We had 131 identified victims that came forward. And those are the victims that do come forward, because a lot of them do not come forward, because a lot of them are children, girls, boys, and women. These are probably 99% of the victims of sexual exploitation and abuse. Now, the other statistic is kind of revealing, because you have 255 reported allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse involving partner organizations of the United Nations system. So this is an alarming data. Why? Because it doesn't concern necessarily the United Nations and its personnel, but it means the partners that we engage, maybe it government employees, maybe it other organizations that partner with the UN system to implement projects. So these are the facts. So we know that that there are misconducts happening in the field in relation to operations of the United Nations, and we don't want these statistics to concern IFAD and its partners. So this is why we're raising awareness with you on this problem. So you're here today to learn how to define and detect sexual misconduct. We'll learn what is acceptable and not acceptable behavior, and we'll emphasize the role of prevention, which is key, at IFAD, and also we'll talk about IFAD's victim-centered approach. And then we'll clarify your role and responsibilities and options for actions when you know or you become aware of sexual misconduct, okay? We'll talk about the role of IFAD staff as well. So we all have to join forces to combat sexual harassment, exploitation, and abuse. So let's look at the definition. I'm telling you right now, this is kind of uncomfortable, but we need to talk about it. What did IFAD do? Well, the first thing we did when we were tasked to do something about sexual misconduct, we go back to 2018. And this is when we released a policy on preventing and responding to sexual harassment and sexual exploitation and abuse. Why a policy? Well, we needed to define our zero tolerance stance. What does it mean? And what are the obligations and responsibility of IFAD personnel in that respect? So we have clarified the rules, clarified the expectations, and we have also clarified the responsibilities of staff, raised awareness for staff, and even embed, legally speaking, these provisions in our appointment letters, contracts we have with our consultants, vendors, etc. The policy was also integrated into the IFAD General Conditions for Agricultural Financing. As you know, these conditions form part of all financing agreements that we sign with our government partners. So what does that mean? And we'll come back to those general conditions because it creates obligations also for our government partners and also for you who will be working or are working on that finance operation. So the policy also obviously applies to us as IFAD personnel. It applies to anyone with a contract, vendors, interns, everyone. And it applies, and we'll come back on how it applies to our borrowers and recipients of IFAD funding. So there we go. The definitions are here, and these are definitions that we imported from the United Nations. So we did not invent them. We use what the United Nations is using. So sexual harassment is defined as any unwelcome sexual advance, request for sexual favor, or other verbal, non-verbal, or physical conduct of a sexual nature that unreasonably interferes with work, alters or is made a condition of employment, or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So you will understand that sexual harassment is a misconduct that happens on the workplace. There's reference to work, so it's something that happens in the workplace between colleagues, all right? Sexual exploitation and abuse is a bit different because we're talking here about a misconduct targeted towards beneficiaries. So the people we serve with our project-funded operations. So sexual exploitation and abuse of beneficiaries in the context of IFAD operations in the field means any actual or attempted abuse of a position of vulnerability, differential power, or trust for sexual purposes, including but not limited to profiting monetarily, socially, or politically from the sexual exploitation of others, that's obviously sexual exploitation, or the actual or threatened physical intrusion of a sexual nature, whether by force or under unequal or coercive conditions, which is sexual abuse. So you will know that sexual exploitation and abuse, or SEA, is a behavior that's committed, the victim and affected person is a beneficiary in the field, all right? So this is the difference between those two misconduct, but those misconduct as are equally severe. And if one staff member of IFAD commits one of those misconduct, this person is subject to the worst disciplinary measure in IFAD, which is summary dismissal, and the case could also be referred by the president of IFAD to the National Authority for Prosecution under national laws. So this is very severe, as you can tell. Now, some people ask me, yes, but what does that mean concretely when we talk about sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, sexual harassment? Do you have examples? And yes, these examples are actually examples of matters that did happen in the United Nations. So this is why we are giving you and pointing to a concrete behavior to match those misconduct. So, for example, a sexual exploitation, who's concerned about it? Well, us, IFAD personnel, you working on an IFAD operation, funded operation, and who's the victim? It's the beneficiary. So what type of behavior are we talking about? Well, we're talking about any actual or attempted abuse of position, of vulnerability, differential power, trust for sexual purposes. This is sexual exploitation. Example, very clear, offering money, gifts, or job in exchange for sex, or withholding services, or blackmailing for sex, hiring prostitutes, and threatening, and even the threat of a sexual exploitation constitutes sexual exploitation. So you saw example of that in the field, humanitarian agencies, for example, exchanging food for sex. So these cases did happen. Sexual abuse, well, again, who's concerned by this? It's us, and the victim is a beneficiary. So what is sexual abuse? Well, you can only imagine what it is. Is it a physical aggression of sexual nature? And examples can be all kinds of aggressions, unwanted, and I stress the word unwanted, touching, kissing, threats of unwanted sexual acts. Raping is the worst case, and any sexual activity with a child is considered as a sexual abuse. And in the UN system and in IFAD, a child is considered as anyone under the age of 18 years of age, and this is irrespectively of the national law. That may be different for the age, the legal age. So this is very serious, and we adopt the United Nations stance on this. Sexual harassment, who's concerned by it? Well, us all here. It's a misconduct that happens in the workplace. So again, we're talking about unwelcome advances or conduct of a sexual nature that creates a very intimidating, hostile work environment. You can imagine those kind of examples, unwanted touching, kissing, and speaking inappropriately to colleagues. Obviously, worst case scenario is physical aggression. So these are the type of behavior or misconduct that we're talking about here. So now that we went over these definitions, we have here 3 scenarios, and they're actually real scenarios that did happen in the United Nations, not in IFAD, but in the UN. So let's see if you can determine which misconduct we're talking about here. In the first scenario, we have Mrs. Aminatou. Obviously, all the names are fictitious, so we have Mrs. Aminatou, who works in a UN agency and sometimes receives personal emails from her colleague, even though she does not want to receive them. And more often than not, the emails contain photos of nude or topless women in suggestive poses. So what do you think this best describes this situation? Are we talking about a situation of sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, or sexual harassment? Is there anyone? Please go ahead and speak because I can't see anyone on my screen right now. Is there anyone who wants to venture and respond? What do you think it is? So Mrs. Aminatou,
Sylvie,
who works in the UN agency and received these.
Sylvie, this is Meera.
Yeah.
Since you can't see, I just want to quickly translate what is expected because not everyone is very well versed with English. They can read and understand, but what you are asking them to do, I'll just quickly explain and then maybe the team members can respond. Okay? बेसिकली वो कह रहे हैं ना कि ये जो 3 डेफिनेशन दिया है उन्होंने कि सेक्सुअल मिसकॉन्डक्ट का, तो इस तीनों केसेस में कौन वाला सेक्सुअल एक्सप्लॉयटेशन माना जाएगा, कौन वाला सेक्सुअल अब्यूज माना जाएगा और कौन वाला सेक्सुअल हरासमेंट माना जाएगा, है ना? तो उसकी नजर अगर आप लोगों में से कोई बताना चाहे कि सिनेरियो 1 जो है मिस आमिनातू का, ये कौन सा है? Is it sexual exploitation? Is it sexual abuse or sexual harassment? अब आप में से कोई बोलिए.
Just say it's sexual harassment. Ma'am, I feel it's sexual harassment. Scenario 1 that you explained is sexual harassment.
Yes, well done, well done. It is a situation of sexual harassment because it is a misconduct happening in the workplace. So we have Mrs. Aminatu who works in a UN agency and she receives inappropriate emails with pornographic material from her colleague. So this is a situation of potential sexual harassment, all right? On the second scenario, we have, again, I would just like to reiterate the fact that these names are fictitious, they're not real names. So we have here Mrs. Sanjit, he's a local driver contracted by a UN agency. He likes to tell how he had sex with some of the beneficiaries at the distribution site, particularly the young and pretty ones. So what do you think this is? Is this a situation of sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, or sexual harassment?
It's a case of sexual abuse, ma'am.
Yes. Well done. It is a situation of sexual abuse. Why? Because there is a sexual relationship between UN employee, a driver, and the beneficiary. And there could even be a potential for sexual exploitation because we're talking about the distribution site. So it could be that this local driver is exchanging food also for sexual favors, but we don't know. We don't have enough facts for that, but we do know that it is a sexual abuse situation. Well done. In the third scenario, Mr. Hassan, who works for a local NGO, develops a serious relationship with a young beneficiary. Whenever he can, he sends her family extra food rations. At one point, he offers to marry her so that he can take care of her in the long term. So you will imagine that this last scenario is a scenario of sexual exploitation. So Mr. Hassan is using a young beneficiaries and to send food rations to the family. So we see a sexual relationship where he's exploiting this young person to give food to the family, and this would be a situation of sexual exploitation and also of sexual abuse. So these are situations that did happen in the United Nations system. So this is why we're here to discuss this problem. So who's responsible? Who has to do what? So here we have what IFAD staff and what we call non-staff, it means IFAD consultants and interns. So what we are responsible for and what we are borrowers and project parties, so you are responsible for. So we at IFAD, we have to work and behave in a manner that respects and foster each other's rights and the rights of the beneficiaries. So we have obviously to abstain from any acts of sexual misconduct, and if we become aware of an act of sexual misconduct, we have the obligation to report timely any allegations of sexual harassment, exploitation, abuse that may arise at IFAD or in connection with IFAD-funded operations. We have also, as IFAD personnel, the duty to cooperate with any review or investigations on allegations of sexual harassment, exploitation, abuse, and to respond, fully to requests for information. So when we are concerned with an allegation, obviously IFAD has the jurisdiction and the possibility to investigate on its own staff and personnel, okay? When it comes to our partners, these are obligations that are in the our policy on sexual harassment, exploitation, abuse. Let me recall that the policy has been embedded in the general conditions that are part of each financing agreement. So you have obligations as well. So what are your obligations to ensure that the project is carried out in accordance with the policy, so zero tolerance for sexual misconduct? If you become aware of a sexual misconduct in relation to the project funded by IFAD, you have to properly inform IFAD of this allegation. And as IFAD, and this is again in the policy and general conditions, we can even request the government partner to take specific action, including to investigate any allegations that could concern government staff, contractor, etc. We also want to see in your contract, the national contracts that you extend, funded by the IFAD financing, any contract you extend to contractor suppliers, we would like to see clauses prohibiting sexual misconduct, establishing an obligation to report to you any allegations, or to IFAD, any allegations that the contractor may see on sexual misconduct. And also, we'd like to see in your contract, your national contract that you extend to contractors, a clause on termination. Usually we have clauses on termination in contracts, but we'd like to see that termination can be also based on proven acts of sexual misconduct. So this is these are the obligations that we both have by, if we read our policy. So who's responsible? Well, we all are responsible, but we have specific responsibility with my office at IFAD. So the ethics office, we are the corporate focal point in IFAD, and we report, by the way, to our executive board on a quarterly basis on the efforts we do to combat, to prevent and respond to sexual harassment and exploitation abuse. We coordinate the SCA focal point program in all country offices, and we have Mira Mishra, who's here as a focal point as well for India. We manage at the ethics office mandatory training programs for our personnel on sexual harassment and exploitation abuse, and we are also a dedicated reporting channel. So we have contacts where individual inside and outside of IFAD can reach out to report allegations of sexual misconduct. We review them. We also could recommend interim measures, and we refer matters to investigations on the sexual misconduct. We manage the whistleblowing protection procedures against retaliations. Those procedures are publicly disclosed on the corporate IFAD.org website. And as I mentioned, we report on a quarterly basis to our IFAD executive board and senior management. We have our colleagues in the IFAD Office of Audit and Investigation. They also have reporting lines, and they can investigate sexual misconduct. So this is from our side, what we can do. But obviously, when we talk about investigation, reporting, the damage has already been done. So this is why it's important to act prior to this. So prevention, we're trying to put a lot of effort in prevention. So why is that? Well, because when you have a victim, the damage is done, and the damage can leave a lot of consequences on someone. So here we have, this is part of our victim-centered approach, what we should do if a victim comes forward with allegations of sexual misconduct. We have to listen, we have to empathize with this person, we have to put this person in a safe environment to be able to discuss, and we need to support the victim. So these are elements of what we think is part of the victim-centered approach. Now you have to be aware that when you will go on mission and you will speak to beneficiaries, maybe someone will tell you that they have been sexually abused. Maybe this could happen to you. What do you do? So these are elements that should guide you. Listen, make sure that you have the person in a safe environment, not in between in a crowd. Listen to what this person has to say, show empathy and support. And then this is key because it's not easy to speak up. And if you have somebody talking to you, you have to stop and listen. So why is this important? Because the impact of sexual exploitation and abuse on beneficiaries is absolutely devastating. So why? Because you can imagine the family and the peers of this victim in their village, the stigmatization, the shame. Often the victims of sexual misconduct are rejected by their community, and sometimes there are children that are born out of sexual misconduct. So if you want to see more about sexual misconduct in the UN system, there is a tracker that is that is publicly disclosed. It is the Secretary General of the United Nations tracker on SCA. And you can see all the allegations and you can see how devastating it is because young people, are often the victims and their life is destroyed, basically. It's really difficult to rebuild. So the community where the victim is also is affected because they lose trust in the organization. Let's say that the perpetrator of sexual abuse is an IFAD personnel or someone from your side. You can imagine that the community, everybody loses trust in the project. And so that leads to a lot of emotion, a lot of anger. And the organization, us or we have reputational risks that are immense. We have lots of funding because member states won't want to fund us again. So it has also very serious impact on all of us.
So how can we create and maintain an environment that prevents sexual misconduct? Well, the first thing is to raise awareness, and this is what we're doing today. And for us, we have mandatory trainings that our personnel have to complete, and they have to complete it not once. No, they have to complete and then recertified every 3 years. So this is what we do at IFAD. We have our SEA focal point program coordinated by my office. We have 70 IFAD staff all over our offices, country offices throughout the world that have been trained to be an SEA focal point. And that means that they can even receive allegations and bring those to my office. So basically, the focal points, the IFAD focal points are my eyes and ears on the ground, and they have to raise awareness also locally. And it would be nice also that you on the project, that you have a focal point too. So if I would like to put that to you, and if you have a focal point, that would be great. Lastly, we have risk assessments that are conducted when we design a project. And those risk assessment means that sometimes mitigation measures should be in place in the project design. So this is what we do. You probably heard about the CCAP. This is where we do the risk assessment. So again, I think through my colleague, there were a distribution of materials ahead of this session. So I would invite you to read the material that was distributed, specifically the guide for borrowers and recipients, because it gives you really quickly all you need to understand from your role, your responsibility. And it also has QR codes that allows you to retrieve relevant documents. So you can also discuss with my colleagues Mira, as she is an IFAD SCA focal point. So speaking up, I said it is not easy. That's absolutely true. And Who can and who should speak up and report allegations? First, you have us, IFAD personnel. We have that obligation to report when we become aware of potential acts of sexual misconduct. So we have this obligation in IFAD. And by the way, we consider anonymous reports as well. Implementing partners, this is you. You also have an obligation to report potential acts of sexual misconduct, either to your national channels if you have, and IFAD has to be made aware. So you have to inform IFAD as well. And others who can report, obviously the victims, if they can, someone on behalf of the victims, because we find that witnesses can come forward more easily because they're not personally involved in the misconduct. And someone who wants to remain anonymous, I mentioned we receive anonymous complaints and we consider them. So again, reporting is confidential, can be done anonymously, and these matters, sexual misconduct is taken not only seriously, but given a very high priority for review by my office and for investigation when an IFAD personnel is involved in the sexual misconduct. As I mentioned, the discipline measure in IFAD are extremely severe. These are contacts where allegations can be forwarded. So I have a confidential helpline, a confidential email address, and also a mobile WhatsApp enable where I can be reached. We have obviously Mira and the director of the IFAD office who can receive allegations as well and in consultation with my office. And we have obviously our colleagues in audit and oversight that have confidential helplines as well. So this is how you can report. These we have also on the corporate ifad.org website some way to report there as well. These contacts you'll find in the documentation that was circulated to you prior to this session. So that brings me to the end of this presentation, and I'm obviously available should you wish to ask me questions. So over to you.
आप लोग के कोई सवाल हो इससे रिलेटेड तो पूछिए आप माइक लेके पूछिए इंट्रोड्यूस योरसेल्फ
Thank you so much, ma'am, for a very inspiring and very effective presentation on a very important topic, ma'am. I would congratulate you and thank you once again, and to Meera ma'am also for organizing this presentation for us. What I feel is that prevention is always better than cure. Remind ourselves, it's better to create an environment which is conducive towards ensuring safe workplace and safe area for women or whatever we say. So my point is that the focus of every organization, be at national or international level, must be first on taking all measures possible to create an environment which is conducive for people which are going to be covered with that project in the project area, for them to feel safe, to feel at home, to feel comfortable with. First and most important thing, because it's, as you said, that very stringent actions are taken, and action in effect for cases of sexual abuse or violation or exploitation are very severe, and they are not good for anyone. Even the victim is going through a psychological trauma. So after effects are not happy for anybody. So we should take all measures so that such things do not occur at all. That is the most important point which I wanted to convey to you, ma'am. Second thing is, as you mentioned, three cases of like sexual abuse, exploitation, and sexual misconduct. So, one point was that the person who was engaged in the task of distributing food or whatever material, he was trying to exploit the beneficiaries. Like he was trying to get some sort of a favor from them, sexual favor or whatever his intention was, and then in exchange for that, he was giving what was due for them. Irony is, he was giving to them what was meant to be given to them, isn't it? So he was taking favors for what was to be given to them, which was their entitlement actually. So my point is, sometimes when people they are not aware about their entitlements, about their rights, about their dues, then also there is a threat, there is a possibility that some of them may fall prey to such tendencies. Because if they are aware that this is our entitlement, this is the criteria, if I fulfill this criteria, I will get this benefit. This is the project, and these are the conditions, eligibility criteria, and if I fulfill these criteria, I will get benefit, come what may. I do not have to do any favor. I don't have to have to oblige anybody for that because that would be given to me. I am fulfilling these criteria. So, second most important point, which I think is to make the beneficiary aware of the criteria which the project wants to convey to them, that these are the criteria. If you meet these criteria, you would automatically get the benefit of this project or this particular scheme. So when they are aware, nobody can dare take any advantage of these beneficiaries. This is my second point. So these two important points, as I thought I would convey to you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. This is absolutely critical comments that you made. Thank you for those. You're absolutely right on both points. One on prevention and how critical it is to really invest in prevention, because once the damage is done, we're in that downhill spiral where everybody's affected, the victim being the first one, the community, and us, trying to invest in rural people. And so I think that you're absolutely right. We should focus on prevention and raising awareness at all levels with everybody that are involved in the projects that IFAD finances. So that means you, that means the contractors that you engage, etc. And on the exploitation, you're absolutely right to say that some beneficiaries are vulnerable and they're not aware of their rights. And you're right, they are not, and they're the perfect prey for those predators. So I think that it is an obligation we all have to be vigilant with regard to our operations. So when we're in the field, and also take advantage of raising awareness locally. That means going, if you have an opportunity to raise awareness within, a village, with local actors, this is important. The information has to trickle down, all the way down to beneficiaries, so they don't get into this situation of thinking that it is normal to trade food for sex or whatever action for sex. So I think that you made a very compelling plea, and I can't agree with you more. So thank you for that. Is there I see there's a raised hand, but I don't see the name.
Yeah,
so please go ahead.
Yeah, ma'am, I'm the project director, Reed. So ma'am, just adding on to what you just said, that it's important that the information should go to the beneficiary. And I think with this session, that one more insight which we have got, that we always talk about sexual harassment at workplace, and when there are people, we have people who are implementing the project, and since they are women, men, all mixed group, so we talk about that. But herein, I think the major component is that there is sexual exploitation of the beneficiary, and we are dealing with beneficiaries at large. And to add on to that, ma'am, I would just assure that whenever we are developing our IEC material for the project and also the training material for our staff on the ground, that we would be incorporating this, and also that what can be the complete grievance literacy mechanism, and as you mentioned that what are IFAD is a mechanism at place. So that will be all incorporating in the IEC material and the training material which we will publish and then hand it over in the project in the coming years. That I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. I really applaud this initiative. Thank you. This is excellent, and it is really a step in the right direction to ensure that the information is known to all involved in the project. So thank you for that. I really welcome this initiative. Any other comments, please? I see none.
I'm trying to encourage the men to also ask some questions. कोई सवाल नहीं, कुछ नहीं? Okay. One more question.
Good evening, ma'am. I am APD Nainital, Assistant Project Director. Ma'am, I would like to ask, since we were talking about all this, is there any provision for what kind of support do we give to the victim once this act has been done? We are filing complaints against the person who's done this, but is there any kind of support we offer to the victim? What kind of support policy is there for the victim?
Very relevant question. Thank you. Yes, as you rightly said, support is critical. And this is why I work with my colleagues who are SEA focal points to try to identify local support, because in some countries you do have local support available for victims of sexual misconduct. But from the United Nations side, there is a trust fund available for victims of sexual exploitation and abuse. So as a UN body, we can tap into those funds if we have a situation of a victim, and especially this fund also helps the victims who have children or born out of sexual misconduct, exploitation, abuse. So there is a UN fund. It is funded by member states. And so that is available for beneficiaries and victims of sexual exploitation and abuse. I always encourage also our focal points to see what is available out there locally, and that's why I often recommend that our partners have a focal point as well on sexual misconduct on the project team, just so that we can interact on these important topics. So I would welcome that from your side, if possible, so that Mira here can be in touch with that focal point if need be, and so we have an entry point from your end. So that would be a good idea. Over.
Hi, Sylvie. So I think I see no other hands and no other questions either online or from the room. So shall we conclude the session then?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. This was great, and thank you for the questions and comments. And should you wish to ask me any questions that you may think of after the session, don't hesitate to either come directly to me or through Mira. I can certainly communicate like that if you have additional comments. So thank you again, and it was a pleasure to be with you, and all the best for the rest of your workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvie. Thank you on behalf of.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. For the attention of everyone, 2 minutes सुन ले, क्योंकि आज का तो फिर ये दिन कंप्लीट हो गया है. कोई और अगर आप लोग के सवाल रहते हैं तो पूछ सकते हैं. और वरना कल जो है हम लोगों ने थोड़ा फेरबदल किया है शेड्यूल में। मॉर्निंग में करीब 10 से 11:30 हम लोग लाइन डिपार्टमेंट के ऑफिसर्स को बुलाए हैं, वो अपने काम के बारे में थोड़ी जानकारी दें। जैसे आपने देखा होगा कि फिशरीज के लोग आए थे, तो उनके पास काफी सवाल वगैरह थे, वो डाउट्स थे। तो उस तरह से कल एग्री, हॉर्टी और लाइफ स्टॉक के लोग आएंगे, तो 10 से 11:30 वो होगा। फिर 11:30 से 12:30 पहले एग्जिट स्ट्रेटजी करेंगे, और पोस्ट लंच 1:30 से जो मेन स्ट्रीमिंग पे है सारा, मतलब जेंडर पे कैसे अप्रोच करना है, न्यूट्रिशन, बिकॉज ये प्रोजेक्ट जेंडर सेंसिटिव, जेंडर मेन स्ट्रीम है, न्यूट्रिशन सेंसिटिव है, तो उसमें यूथ के बारे में क्या क्या कैसे करना है, कैसे रिपोर्टिंग करना है, वो डिस्कशन होंगे। और उसके पहले 1:30 से 2:30 सिकैप जो है, जो सोशल इकोनॉमिक एंड क्लाइमेट एडेप्टेशन प्लान, उस पे वो बहुत एक डिटेल डॉक्यूमेंट होता है, उसमें सारी चीज़ें होती है, इंक्लूडिंग ये आपका सेक्सुअल हैरेसमेंट वगैरह के ऊपर भी उसमें रहता है। इट्स अ कॉम्पोजिट डॉक्यूमेंट। तो ये जो जितने प्रेजेंटेशन 1:30 से 5 के बीच होंगे, दीज विल ऑल बी डन बाय हेडक्वार्टर स्टाफ, ठीक है। बट आप लोग अपनी तैयारी से आइएगा, कोई सवाल हो कुछ हो उसके बारे में, ठीक है।